"Burn the book," the controller said, and laid a brass lighter on my desk as though he were leaving a tip. I had been the night clerk of the Westgate offices for 19 years, and in all that time, no man had ever told me to destroy a record to my face. We lost things, of course. A page tore. A line smudged in the rain when a sentry wrote in the cold. Once a whole month of dockets went into the river when a cart axle broke on the bridge. But those were accidents, and accidents we logged too, because the logging of the accident is itself a record, and the record is the only thing the offices have ever been for. We do not guard the gate. The men in red guard the gate. We guard what happened at the gate, which is a humbler thing, and I have come to believe, a harder one. So when Mr. Aldous Crisp, controller of the Westgate and a man I had served under for 6 years without ever once being asked to do a wrong thing, set a lighter on the green leather of my desk at 1:30 in the morning, and told me to burn the incident book, I did not move my hand toward it. I looked at the lighter. It was a good one, brass with a worn thumb wheel, and I noticed that my first thought was not horror but a small, stupid clerk's thought, which was, "That is not regulation. We use sealing wax and a candle, and the candle is in the drawer." "Sir," I said. "Don't sir me, pal. Burn it or lose it, I don't care which. The Tuesday book, just the Tuesday book." He was not looking at me. He was looking at the door behind me, which was the door to the records room, where the books live in their long ranks on the iron shelves, and where, that Tuesday 3 nights before, a thing had been written down that someone very large and very far above both of us had decided should never have happened. I want to tell this plainly because the men who tell it loudly always get it wrong. They make the guard into a lion and the official into a snake, and they make me into nothing at all, a hand that held a pen. It was not like that. Crisp was not a snake. He was a frightened man with a mortgage and a daughter at a good school, and a superior who had let him understand, in the gentle, deniable way the powerful have, that the Westgate offices would be reorganized, and Mr. Crisp pensioned early and without honor unless one page of one book ceased to exist. He was not evil. He was only afraid, and he had decided to spend his fear on me, because I was below him and the book was below him, and he could not reach the man above him with anything but obedience. And the guard was a man named Sergeant Owen Hale, and he was standing at the records room door with his back to it and his rifle grounded, and his face doing the thing those men's faces do, which is nothing, which is the whole point. Let me set the night properly, because the night matters. The Westgate is the working gate of the old palace, not the great show front where the tourists stand, but the side that the world actually comes through. Coal carts and laundry vans and the night post, doctors and tradesmen and the household's own servants going off shift, and now and again, after the theaters let out and the great houses emptied, the carriages and motor cars of people who had been somewhere they did not wish to be seen leaving. The offices sit just inside, a low stone building with a green door and a brass plate gone soft at the edges from a century of polishing. We keep the gate's books. Every vehicle in, every vehicle out, every incident. And an incident is anything from a drunk turned away to a delivery refused to, on the night in question, a man dead in the road. The Tuesday book held the Tuesday incident, and the Tuesday incident was this. At 11 minutes past midnight, a fast, dark motorcar had come down the approach far too quickly, struck a man crossing toward the night post, Old Tam Royal, who swept the forecourt and had swept it for 30 years and was deaf in one ear and slow on his feet and harmed no one in his life, and had not stopped, had in fact accelerated. The car had gone out through the Westgate at a speed the standing orders forbid, and Sergeant Hale, who had been on the gate, had seen it, and had done 3 things in the space of a minute that have since been picked over by better men than me. He had not fired. A sentry may fire to stop a vehicle that has become a weapon, and a car that has just killed a man and is fleeing is by any reading a weapon. He did not fire, because beyond the gate the street was full of people leaving the late houses, and a missed shot or a bullet through a tire at speed would have killed someone else's Tam Royal, and Hale judged, in the time it takes to read this sentence, that he would not buy one dead man back with another. So he let it go. He had knelt by Tam Royal, who was already gone. And then he had come into the offices, and he had given me, in the flat, exhausted voice of a man who has just watched something he could not prevent, the full account. The time, the direction, the speed, the color of the car, the partial number of the plate, the make as well as he could read it in the dark, and one more thing, the thing that was the whole trouble. As the car had swung through the gate, it had clipped the stone of the arch, and a small object had been thrown loose and had landed at the foot of the post, and Hale had picked it up before the blood and the bother, because a sentry picks up what falls at his post, and it was a cap badge. A particular cap badge, of a particular regiment of honor, the kind of badge that one specific kind of man wears, the kind of man who is invited to the great houses and is driven home fast in dark cars and is, it turns out, very difficult to hold to account. I had written it all down. I had written it in my own hand in the Tuesday book, and Hale had read it back and signed it, and I had blotted it and ruled the line under it and closed the book and put it on the shelf, and I had thought, with the small grim satisfaction of a man whose work is to make the truth survive the night, there. Whatever else happens, there it is. He cannot unhappen now. Tam Royal is in the book. That was Tuesday. This was Friday, 1:30, and the controller's lighter was on my desk. "It's already gone up the line, sir," I said. "The Friday return went to the registry. They'll have the summary. The summary says a vehicle left its speed, a pedestrian was struck, the matter is with the constables. The summary says nothing." He had clearly read the summary, he had clearly checked. "The badge isn't in the summary, pal. The badge is only in the book. The full account is only in the book. Lose the book and there's a smudge and a sad accident and a poor old man and the constables shrug because they always shrug and everyone goes home. Keep the book and—" He stopped. He had not meant to say so much. He picked up the lighter again, as if to make it casual, and set it down again, which was not casual at all. "Keep the book and a name comes out," I said. "Keep the book and I lose my place and you lose yours and the sergeant there." He tipped his head at Hale without looking at him, gets investigated for not firing, which they will frame as cowardice, and his 20 years end in a hearing. That's what keeping the book does, pal. It doesn't bring the old man back. It just feeds 3 more men into the same machine that ran him over. It was, I will admit, a good argument. It was the best argument, the one the machine always makes, the one that has eaten more honest books than fire ever did, that the truth helps no one, that it only spreads the harm, that mercy lies in letting it go. I am not a brave man. I have a clerk's courage, which is the courage to be exact, and exactness is a cold and unsatisfying thing to set against a frightened man at 1:30 in the morning. So I did the cowardly thing which I am not proud of and will not hide. I reached for the book. And Sergeant Hale said one word. "No. I want to be careful here, because of how these things get told." He did not roar it. He did not step forward or raise his rifle or do anything a sentry is forbidden to do. He said it the way you would say a fact, the way you'd say rain, if a man asked you the weather. He said no, and he stayed exactly where he was, with his back against the records room door, and his eyes forward, and his hands where they had been, and the single syllable hung in that small stone room like a struck bell. Crisp turned to him slowly. "You don't have a voice in this, Sergeant. You're a sentry. Your post is the gate, not the paperwork." "My post," Hale said, "is whatever I'm standing in front of, sir." And he did not move. I took my hand back from the book. I am not too proud to say that the sergeant's one word did for me what all my years of exactness could not. It put a wall at my back when I had none of my own. It is easy to be exact alone at a desk at night. It is harder to be exact with a superior's lighter glinting at you. But a man cannot be the only honest thing in a room when there is a second honest thing standing against a door saying, "No," because then the cowardice has company on the other side, and a coward will choose the side with company. I chose the door. "I'm not burning it, sir," I said. My voice did not come out as steady as the sergeant's, but it came out. Crisp looked at the two of us, the soft night clerk with ink on his cuff and the still sergeant against the door, and something went out of his face. Not the fear. The fear stayed. What went out was the hope that this would be easy, that he could spend his fear on us and have it taken. He picked up his lighter and he put it in his pocket, and he said in a voice that had gone very quiet, "Then it's on you. Both of you. When they come for it, and they will come for it, it's on you." And he went out into the night, and the green door closed behind him, and the candle on my desk leaned in the draught and stood up again, and Sergeant Hale and I were alone with the book and the dead man in it. We did not say anything for a moment. Then Hale came off the door, the first time he had moved, and he stood at my desk, and he looked down at the Tuesday book in its plain board covers, and he said, "They'll send someone with more weight than him. I know. And the book's in a room with a lock I don't have the key to, and a window onto the yard, and the Comptroller has the master key to the whole building." He said it without heat, the way a man counts the ways a wall can be got round. "If they want it gone, it'll be gone, and there'll be a story for how. A flood, a fire in the night, a clerk who took it home and lost it on the omnibus." He looked at me. "That last one's you, Pell." I felt the cold of it go down my back. He was right. The simplest way to lose a book is to lose the man who keeps it, to make me the accident. A clerk drinks. A clerk is careless. A clerk is dismissed for losing a record, and the record is gone, and the dismissed clerk's word against a great house is no word at all. They would not even have to lie very much. "Then what do we do?" I said. And I will tell you I had no idea. My whole training, my whole 19 years, was to keep one true copy safe in one true place. The idea that the true place itself could be the danger had never once occurred to me. Hale was quiet for a while. Then he said the thing that turned the whole night. "A book is one thing in one place," he said. "Truth doesn't have to be." I did not understand him at first. He had to say it the slow way, the sentry's way, breaking it into pieces a frightened clerk could pick up one at a time. The book was dangerous because it was singular. Destroy the one object and the truth died with it. But the truth in the book was not the book. The truth was a set of facts. A time, a direction, a speed, a color, a partial plate, a make, a badge, and facts can be copied. And a fact copied into 10 honest hands in 10 honest places is a fact you cannot burn, because to burn it you would have to find and burn all 10, and you would have to do it before any one of them spoke, and you cannot. "You want to copy it," I said. "I want you to copy it," he said, "cleanly, in your own hand, which the registry knows, exact every figure, every letter of the plate, the badge described to the last detail. And I want it sworn, you witness it, I sign it, dated tonight. And then I want it to stop being one thing in one room." He almost smiled, which on that face was like a crack of light under a door. "You're the man who makes the truth survive the night, aren't you? So make it survive." I have thought many times since about how strange it was that the sentry taught the clerk his own trade. But that is the thing about those still men that the loud tellers never understand. They look like they only know how to stand. In truth, they spend their whole working lives watching what passes a gate and deciding, over and over in the held breath between one heartbeat and the next, what is true and what is performance, what is a man in a hurry and what is a man fleeing, what is a sad accident and what is a thing that must be written down. They are, every one of them, clerks of a kind, clerks of the moment, who keep their books in their heads. Hale had simply applied his trade to mine. So we worked. I made the first fair copy at my desk, by candle and the gaslight both, slowly, getting every figure right, reading each line aloud to him as I wrote it so he could correct me. And twice he did the speed, which I had rounded, and one letter of the partial plate, which in my own first entry on Tuesday I had written as a thing that could be read 2 ways, and he made me write it both ways and note that it could be read either. Because a thing that pretends to more certainty than it has is a thing a clever advocate can break, and a thing that admits exactly what it does and does not know is a thing that holds. When it was done, I read the whole of it back, and he listened with his eyes closed, standing, and at the end he said, "That's the night. That's exactly the night." And he took my pen and signed it, Owen Hale, Sergeant, and the date, and I witnessed it, and we had on a single sheet the truth made portable. Then I made 4 more. And here is where my trade, which had felt so small against the Comptroller's lighter, turned out to be the whole of the matter, because I knew, as Hale could not have known, as no one but an old clerk of the gate offices could know, exactly where in the great machine an honest paper goes to be safe. Not up. Up was where the weight was. Up was where Crisp's frightened superior sat and his superior's friends. Up, the paper would arrive and be received and be regretfully mislaid. Honest papers do not survive by going up. They survive by going sideways and down, into the dull, stubborn, unglamorous places of the household that no great man ever thinks to lean on, because no great man has ever needed anything from them. I sent 1 copy, by the morning's internal post and under my own seal, to the keeper of the rolls, not the registry which took the summaries, but the keeper, an old woman named Mistress Devora Quint, who had charge of the permanent record of the household, and who had, in 40 years, never once let a sealed thing properly entered be unentered, and who answered to no one at the West Gate at all, but to the master of the household direct. I sent 1 to the coroner's clerk of the district, because a man had died, and a death has its own machine that the household cannot reach into. I sent 1 to the regiment, Hale's regiment, addressed to the adjutant, because if they meant to make a hearing of Hale's not firing, then the regiment would want the true account in its own hand before the household's version arrived, and a regiment is a jealous keeper of its own men. And the last copy Hale himself took, folded small inside his tunic against his chest, where the badge had been on Tuesday night, and he said, "If it comes to it, this one walks out the gate on its own legs and doesn't stop for anybody." The original we left exactly where it was on its shelf in its rank untouched. That was deliberate too. "Don't hide it," Hale said. "Hide it and you've made yourself a thief, and a thief is easy to be rid of. Leave it where it belongs, in the open on the shelf, and the only way to it is through you, and the only story for its going is a story that has your name in it and looks exactly like what it is. Leave the truth in the light, in other words, and make any lie about it stand up in the same light. It is the same principle as a man who will not move from a door. You do not win by being clever. You win by being so plainly, stubbornly, exactly where you are supposed to be that the wrong thing has nowhere to happen without everyone seeing it happen." We finished as the sky went gray over the yard, and Hale went back to his post for the last hour of his watch, and I sat with my 5-fold truth scattered now to the 4 corners of the household and the law, and I felt, for the first time in 3 nights, that I had done my actual job. They came for the book that afternoon. Not Crisp. Crisp had spent his weight and had none left. They sent a man I did not know, a smooth, unhurried man in a good coat who came in by daylight with a junior of his own and a leather folder and an air of routine, and who introduced himself as being from the Household's Review of Records, which is the sort of title that does not exist until it is needed and ceases to exist when it has been used. He was very pleasant. He explained that there had been a complaint about the accuracy of certain Westgate entries, that the Tuesday book was to be taken into the Central Review for examination, that I would of course be given a receipt, that this was entirely ordinary. It was the most dangerous moment of the whole affair, and it did not raise its voice once. "Of course, sir," I said, "I'll need the requisition." He smiled. "It's a review, not a requisition." "A book leaves this office on a requisition, sir, signed by the Comptroller and countersigned by the Keeper of the Rolls. Those are the standing orders. If I let a record walk out on anything less, I'm the one who's failed to keep it." I was, I noticed, quoting Hale's principle back to a man who had come precisely to exploit the lack of one. Leave the truth in the light. Make the lie stand up in the same light. The smooth man's smile did not change, but his eyes did just slightly, the way a card player's do when the hand turns. The Comptroller has authorized it. Then the Comptroller will sign the requisition, I said, and the keeper will countersign, and the book will go to the review with a receipt, all in order, and I'll have done my part correctly. I'd be glad to. Shall I send to Mr. Crisp for his signature? He did not want me to send to Mr. Crisp, because Mr. Crisp had already refused once to put his name to the wrong thing in writing. He had brought a lighter, not a form, precisely so that no paper would ever carry his name beside this, and the smooth man knew it. And he did not want the keeper of the rolls drawn in, because the keeper of the rolls was exactly the dull, stubborn, sideways and down place that the weight above could not lean on. I watched him understand that I was not being difficult. I was being correct, and correctness was a wall, and he had been sent with a smile and a folder against a wall, and a smile and a folder are not enough. You're making a mistake, Mr. Pell, he said, gently gathering his folder. I'm making a record, sir, I said. It's the only thing I know how to make. He left without the book, and I understood that we had won the small fight and were about to lose the large one, because men like him do not come back through the front door. They go round. It took 6 days. On the second day, the duty roster changed, and Sergeant Hale was taken off the west gate and posted to a ceremonial duty on the far side of the palace. A quiet, polite exile, an honorable post with no honor in the giving of it, designed to put a great deal of stone and a great deal of distance between the sergeant and the book. He went without complaint, because a soldier goes where he is posted, and he sent me word by a runner of 3 words only: light, stubborn, sideways. Which was him reminding me of everything, in the way those men remind you of everything, with almost nothing. On the 4th day, I was informed by letter that I was suspended from my duties pending an inquiry into irregularities in the keeping of the Westgate records, that I was to surrender my keys and my seal, and that I was not to enter the offices until the inquiry was concluded. There it was, the clerk made the accident. Not a flood, not a fire. Just a quiet letter and a quiet doubt, the doubt that hangs on a man for the rest of his life. There was something wrong with Pell's books, you know, that's why they let him go. I surrendered my keys at the gate to a man who would not meet my eye, and I walked out of the Westgate offices for what I believed was the last time. 19 years ended in a sentence, and I will tell you honestly that on the omnibus home I thought, he was right, Crisp was right. It fed 3 men into the machine, and the old man is still dead. But here is the thing about sideways and down. The weight above us could reach the Westgate roster. It could reach a night clerk's suspension. It could write a letter that put a doubt on a man. What it could not do, what no weight, however great, can ever quite do, is reach into every dull, stubborn corner at once and unmake an honest paper that is already lodged there, sworn and sealed and dated, in a hand the registry knows, witnessed by a sergeant of 20 years' service. It could lose the book. It could lose the clerk. It could exile the sergeant. But it could not lose the copy in the keeper of the rolls, and the copy in the coroner's office, and the copy in the regiment's adjutancy, and the copy folded against a sentry's chest. And it did not even know that all 4 existed, because it had been so busy reaching for the one book on the one shelf that it had never imagined the truth had already walked out the door on 5 sets of legs. Mistress Quint, the keeper of the rolls, was the first to move, and she moved the way old keepers move, which is slowly and then all at once. She received my sealed copy on the morning after the night hail, and I made it, and she did with it exactly what a keeper does. She entered it in the permanent record, gave it a number, and let it lie. She did not raise an alarm. She waited. And when, days later, a request came up from the Household's Review of Records to amend the permanent entry of the Westgate Tuesday matter, to correct it, they said, to align it with the reviewed account, Mistress Quint, who had in 40 years never let a properly sealed thing be unsealed, wrote back a single line that I have since been allowed to read and have copied into my own heart. A sealed record is amended only by the hand that swore it in the presence of the keeper. Produce the sergeant. Produce the sergeant. 3 words from an old woman in a back office, and the whole smooth machine ground on a stone, because the sergeant could not be produced to amend his account, for the simple reason that the sergeant would not amend it, and everyone in the chain knew it. And the moment the regiment was asked to produce one of its own to disown his own sworn statement, the regiment, which had its own copy, and had already read it, and had already understood that one of its sergeants was being quietly punished for the crime of not killing a bystander, declined, with great courtesy and total immovability, to produce him for any such purpose, and asked, also with great courtesy, by what authority a household review proposed to investigate a soldier's conduct on his post without informing his regiment. And the coroner had a dead man, and a dead man is the one thing the household cannot reorganize. The coroner's clerk, holding my 3rd copy, did not care a straw for the household's reviews or the great houses or the cap badge's regiment of honor. He cared that a man named Tam Royal had been struck and killed by a vehicle that left its speed, that the gate office's own sworn account gave a make, a color, a partial plate and a description of an object thrown loose at the scene, and that an inquest must be held, and that the inquest would call the sergeant who saw it, and the clerk who recorded it, and would ask under oath in open court what the object was. I learned all this afterward. At the time I knew none of it. At the time I was a suspended clerk on an omnibus believing he had lost everything for nothing. The machine works in the dark, and the honest man rarely gets to watch it turn. He only sows the true thing in the true ground and then must live, sometimes for a long time, not knowing whether anything will grow. That is the part the loud tellers leave out, because it does not thrill. The part where you have done the right thing and gone home and lost your place, and are not at all sure you were not simply a fool. I lived in that part for 11 days, and I will not pretend they were good ones. It was the inquest that broke it open. An inquest cannot be quietly reorganized, because it is the law's own machine and not the household's, and it sits in public, and it calls whom it calls. They could not keep hail from it. The coroner summoned him, and the regiment delivered him in his own time to the court in full and immaculate order, because if their sergeant was to be looked at by the world, the regiment would by God see that the world looked at a sergeant and not a scapegoat. And they could not keep me from it, because the coroner summoned the clerk who made the record, and a suspended clerk is still the clerk who made the record, and my suspension, which had been meant to silence me, instead became the most interesting fact in the room. I had never given evidence in my life. I am not a speaker. But I had spent 19 years learning to say exactly what happened and not one word more, and it turns out that is precisely the skill a court most wants and most rarely gets. I told them the night. I told them the order to burn the book. I told them, for I was asked directly on oath, and an honest man does not weigh consequences when he is on oath. That is the whole meaning of the oath. That the Comptroller of the Westgate had set a lighter on my desk at 1:30 in the morning, and instructed me to destroy the Tuesday incident book. That I had refused, that the sergeant had refused. That I had then made 5 sworn fair copies of the true account, and sent them to the keeper of the rolls, the coroner, the regiment, and one to the sergeant's own keeping, and that I had been suspended 4 days later on a charge of irregularities in records that did not name a single irregularity because there were none, because the only irregularity in the whole matter was the order to create one. And then the coroner asked the question the whole thing had been bent, for 11 days, toward never being asked. Sergeant Hale, the object thrown loose at the gate that you recovered. What was it? And Sergeant Hale, who had been exiled and produced and summoned, and stood in a witness box as still as he had stood against the records room door, reached inside his tunic, and I saw the smooth man from the household review go white, because he understood in that instant that the fifth copy had not been the only thing the sergeant carried against his chest. And Hale drew out not paper but the badge itself, the actual cap badge, which he had kept and entered and never surrendered. Because a sentry picks up what falls at his post, and a sergeant of 20 years does not lose evidence on an omnibus, and he laid it on the rail of the box, and he said, "It's a cap badge, sir, this regiment," and he named it. It came off the car as it struck the arch. I picked it up at 11 minutes past midnight on the Tuesday, and I gave it to the clerk to enter, and I have had it in my own keeping since the morning I was taken off my post, because I judged it the one thing they could not be allowed to lose. A cap badge is a small thing. It is brass and enamel, and it sits in a man's palm and weighs nothing. But a cap badge of that regiment is numbered on its back, struck with the issue mark, and the issue marks are kept in a book of their own. The regiment's, not the household's, beyond the household's reach, and a numbered badge belongs to one named man, and the badge on the rail of the coroner's court that day belonged, when its number was read out, to a man whose name I had not known but everyone in the great houses had, a man who was driven home fast in dark cars and who had been, that Tuesday night, at a house 3 streets from the West Gate, and who had left it. His own driver later swore, in a temper and at the wheel himself, which he was not licensed to be and not sober enough to be. I will not give his name. Not because I am protecting him, there is nothing of him left to protect, but because the loud tellers want the name most of all, want to make the whole story a hunt for one bad man, and that is the lie that lets the next one through. The story was never about him. He was only the weight. He was the thing the machine was protecting, but he was not the machine, and a man who fixes his whole attention on the one bad name will miss the truer and more useful fact, which is that a kingdom does not stand or fall on whether it produces bad men. It always will, but on whether, somewhere down in the dull, stubborn corners of it, there is a clerk who will not burn a book, and a sergeant who will not move from a door, and a keeper of the rolls who will not unseal a sealed thing, and a regiment that will not produce a man to disown his honor, and a law with a dead sweeper it cannot be made to forget. That is the thing that held. The man was held to account because the account was held first. He answered for it. Not as quickly as the dead man's family deserved, and not as completely as I would have liked, because the powerful never quite answer all the way to the bottom. But he answered. He was named in the inquest's findings as the driver. The matter went from the coroner to the constables it had been meant to die among, and this time the constables did not shrug, because a sworn gate office record and a numbered badge and an inquest in open court are not a thing a constable can shrug at. He lost the dark cars and the invitations and the regiment of honor that had been the whole of his consequence in the world, and he stood, in the end, in a plain court in a plain coat, and was a small man after all, which is what they always turn out to be when the weight is taken off them, and they have to stand on their own legs like Tam Royal, who had no weight at all and swept a forecourt for 30 years and was the better man, and is the one this story is actually about. And the system that had reached down to suspend me and exile Hale, turned, the way a great slow thing turns when enough small true things refuse to move under it. The inquiry into my irregularities was found to have been opened without cause, on an instruction that no one would put their name to, and it was closed, and the finding entered into my record was 4 words, "No fault, commended record," and I have looked at them more times than I will admit. My suspension was lifted with back pay, and an apology I did not ask for and did not particularly want, because the apology was the household apologizing to itself for having tried to make me an accident. I went back to the green door and the brass plate and the long ranks of books, and the keys were put back in my hand, and I confess I stood a moment in the records room with the Tuesday book on its shelf. The original, never moved, never hidden, exactly where it had always been, and I put one finger on its spine, the way you would touch a man's shoulder to thank him, and then I went and lit the candle and got back to work, because the work does not stop for being vindicated. Mr. Crisp was not destroyed, which surprised the loud tellers, who wanted him in the dock beside the great man. He was not in the dock. He had brought a lighter, but he had not, in the end, lit it. He had spent his fear and gone home, and a man who fails to do a wrong thing is not the same as a man who does it. He was moved on quietly to a smaller post, and once, years later, I met him on a bridge and he stopped, and he looked at the river for a while, and then he said, not to me exactly. I should have stood at the door with him, and I said, "You didn't burn it, Aldous," and he said, "No. But I'd have let you." And that was true, and we both knew it, and we shook hands anyway, because the difference between us was not so large that I had any right to be grand about it. And the man who knows his own cowardice and names it on a bridge is most of the way to courage, which is more than can be said for the great man in the plain coat, who to the last believed himself unfortunate rather than wrong. It was Sergeant Hale they could not make small. The regiment, which had been quietly furious from the first that one of its own was being shaped into a coward for the crime of not killing a bystander, made the matter its own once the inquest cleared the air. And it was the regiment, not the household, that put the right word in the record. The question of his not firing, which the machine had meant to use to break him, was examined by men who knew what a gate is, and what a crowded street behind it is, and what a sentry has to weigh in the half-second when a weapon goes past him into a crowd. And they wrote that Sergeant Hale's conduct on the night was correct in every particular. That he had judged rightly not to fire into a crowd, rightly to render what aid he could, rightly to record the matter fully and accurately, and rightly. And this is the line they fought for, the line that mattered, that in declining the order to destroy the record he had upheld the standing duty of every man on a post, which is owed first to the truth of what happens there, and only second to the man who happens to give the order. They posted him back to the west gate. He asked for it. I asked the runner, who told me whether the sergeant had said why, and the runner said Hale had said only, "It's my post," which was the whole of it and needed nothing added. He is still there as I write this. An older man now, as I am an older man, and we do not speak of that weak, because men of our kind do not, but there is a thing we do that says it for us. On the wall of the Westgate offices, beside the green door, in a small dark frame that no tourist ever sees because no tourist ever comes to the working gate, there hangs a single sheet of paper in a clerk's careful hand. The fair copy of the Tuesday account, sworn and witnessed and dated, the 5th of 5, the one the sergeant carried against his chest. We put it there together the day his clearing came through. Not the badge went where evidence goes, into the law's keeping. Not the original book. The original is on its shelf where it belongs, in the light, where any honest hand can find it. Just the copy. Just the proof that on a certain night 2 ordinary men, a soft clerk and a still sergeant, were asked to make the truth disappear, and instead made it impossible to lose. People ask me when they hear the bones of it whether I was brave. I tell them no, and I mean it. I am a clerk. My courage is the courage to be exact. And exactness on its own is a cold thing that bends at 1:30 in the morning when a frightened man you respect lays a lighter on your desk. I reach for the book. I would have burned it. I want that written down because it is true, and because the whole of what I have to give anyone is the keeping of true things. What I had was not courage. What I had was a man at my back who would not move from a door, and who knew, better than I did, who had spent my life believing it, that a true thing kept in one place can be taken, but a true thing copied into enough honest hands cannot. He taught the clerk his own trade. He showed me that the work of keeping the truth is not the work of holding one book against the fire. It is the work of making the truth too widely held to burn, and then of standing, plainly and stubbornly and exactly where you are meant to stand, so that anyone who comes for it has to come for it in the light, in front of everyone, and explain himself. Tam Royal swept the forecourt for 30 years and was struck down by a man in a hurry, and would have been a smudge and a shrug and a sad accident forgotten by spring. He is not. He is in the book, and the book is on the shelf, and beside the green door there is a sheet of paper in a small dark frame, and a sergeant stands his post, and a clerk lights his candle, and the truth of what happened to a deaf old sweeper at 11 minutes past midnight is, now and as long as we keep the gate, a thing that cannot be made to disappear. That is the whole of it. We did not save the kingdom. We saved one true page. But a kingdom, I have come to think, is only ever as honest as its dullest, most stubborn corner on its worst night, and on our worst night the corner held.